Welcome to Dogsthorpe Infant School Launchpad.
This is your captain speaking. We've been cleared for departure.
Okay, Eddie, start the countdown.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Let's go.
Welcome back to Eddie's Launchpads. It's the Dogsthorpe Infant School podcast for parents, teachers and schools. Wherever you're listening, in Peterborough or around the world, welcome. Thank you for choosing us. We greatly appreciate every single listener. So wherever you're listening, I hope you're well, and I hope that you're going to enjoy this episode of Eddie's Launchpads. I'm sure you will. Sometimes somebody comes on the show and they give more than a book, far, far more than a book. And so it is a delight to welcome our guest onto the show today. 3 years ago, back in 2022, we had two guests on the show, and they talked about a new resource, or a resource that was out, they were offering to schools, called Monster Phonics. It was a delight to have them on the show, and they talked about everything they did. And then I found out from Mrs. Waters that Dogsthorpe Infant School were looking for a new phonics scheme. So I said, why don't you listen to the latest edition of the podcast, because you might find that might work for you. Well, guess what, folks? 3 years later, here we are. And the word transformative is used a lot. But I can honestly say that Monster Phonics has been transformative in our school. It has taken us struggling with our phonics up into incredible heights. The results that we're getting are absolutely fantastic. And so I thought we'd get Monster Phonics back onto the show, and it is a true delight to welcome Ingrid Connors to the show. Welcome to the show, Ingrid.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. It's such a pleasure to be here and to be asked to come back again. We're absolutely huge fans of Dogsthorpe Infant School, the whole community, and everything that you do. You are shining.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. We try our best. We try our best. It's not easy. If you're in a school, if you teach in a school, if you lead in a school, you know, in England particularly, it's not easy, but we try our best. Now, Ingrid, it's been 3 years. I can't believe those 3 years. It seems like it's only yesterday. It's been 3 years, and over those 3 years, we've picked up lots more listeners. So could you, for our listeners, say a little bit about yourself, first of all, and how did you come about Monster Phonics?
Okay, well, for me, the journey started actually in childhood. So I born in the UK, but I very much had a community around me that was second language English speakers, and they often talked about spelling and how difficult it was in English. And so as a child, I thought, children love colour. So, and people love colour, and I use colour all the time to help me. Maybe we could use this to help reading and spelling. And I remember talking about it at the time. So like we could have red could make the A sound, and all the different ways of spelling it would be like grouped like this. And that would simplify it, make it easier. And then I went off on my way in life and I worked in research, and then I became a teacher. And I started to see a problem there again, because quite a few children weren't being reached in terms of learning to read, in terms of phonics. And it felt that we were teaching in a way that was perhaps a little bit 2D, a little bit the traditional way wasn't totally inclusive. And I had a special interest as well in dyslexia and supporting children who had already found learning to read very challenging. And so I was looking for a scheme or a product that was very multisensory, that could engage the children that I taught, and some of those were older as well. So I wanted it to be something that would really grab them and they would see it as cool. And I couldn't find that. And so I went back to this idea of colour coding for sound to support learning, to help to scaffold it, to give the children confidence whilst they're learning. And I ended up spending 2 years of research just in that area. And then I started to build the scheme. But luckily I was in a school that they just tried everything, that like all of the ideas, and we saw immediately, straight away, the impact, which gave the fuel to keep going. And really, I suppose if I look at it and think probably what's the very start of the journey, I think I would say for me it would have been when, as a child, I loved school, and I loved the idea of how to make a very creative and engaging school. And I think that's one of the things that I love so much about Dogsthorpe Infant School, that the way it's so magical, like the news bulletins that you do, and all the whole messages of your bee ambassadors, the whole community atmosphere of Dogsthorpe Infant School is something that I always dreamt of creating, to have like this high level of engagement. And so that's kind of like the roots of the scheme: high levels of engagement, and also being inclusive, inclusive for second language learners, inclusive for dyslexia, and using this power of colour, which I knew that children loved. And then in addition to that, I suppose one of the fuels for me for working to develop something was to open up access for children from every single background. Because for me as a child, I went from having, everything was fine at home, I didn't have to worry, until suddenly, probably just felt like overnight, that really it felt like we had nothing in my family, and we really struggled financially, just even in terms of having, food to eat. Generally, it was very tough. And what I found was that obviously it was more difficult to learn in school. I kind of did okay, but my siblings really struggled at that time. And I felt that perhaps aspirations for me in terms of my teachers had changed as well. And so that ultimately gave me a really burning ambition to make sure that does not happen to other children. So the whole thing kind of tied together, like a motivation to help make a real genuine difference, and then going back to being a child and really thinking, okay, what is engaging, what is helpful, and this color coding idea, how we could make learning stick, make it more memorable, came into that as well. So everything kind of I suppose all experiences help lead somewhere. But I knew at the time when I started to work on it and see the impact straight away, I knew this could genuinely change lives. And so I was committed to a long time of work where perhaps people thought I was genuinely a little bit crazy because it hadn't been done before. And I was fine to accept that. But I think every time I hear about life-changing differences in outcomes, well, yeah, it's just incredibly rewarding. So yeah, that's where we are now. It's quite a long answer.
No, it's amazing that now I can see why it's built on such a firm foundation. Monster Phonics is built on something that we know and love at Dogsthorpe, and the whole point of when a child goes through what you clearly went through. If you've got money, I'm not saying if you're a millionaire's family, but if you're okay, if you're comfortable, then chances are you've got some books at home and you can read with your child, and you've got time to do that, and you're not chasing your tail, and the child feels loved, and feel supported. But if you're going through a really challenging time, maybe there's been a relationship breakup, or maybe that you've lost your home because there's financial difficulties, or maybe you've had to move because you're a migrant and you've had to move and you didn't really want to move. Whatever the reason, that child and those children that are going through that deserve exactly the same as the child who's got the library at home, and got the loving parents at home. So to say, oh well, let's separate them from we'll separate the sheep from the goats, sort of thing, and we'll separate them, and we'll do something with them. In a way, isn't good enough, really. You've got to start with the child, and you've got to find a way of asking that child, or discovering from that child, what's the easiest way to learn. And if they can learn through playing, or if they can learn through a cartoon character, then let's get them to learn through that cartoon character. It doesn't matter. The most important thing is they are learning how to read or do their sums or whatever. That's the most important thing.
That's exactly it in a nutshell. And I think the other thing is that, like, parents, every parent, we all want to do our best by our children, and sometimes circumstances can take that away from us. And so, for me, I'd gone from having 2 adults at home to effectively, none, because one had to work all the time because there were 4 children, and we had nothing, and it was even working all the time. We just didn't have even enough then. But my mum was a great inspiration for me, and in terms of wanting to make a difference. But she wasn't able to do the things that she would have liked to have done. And so sometimes by focusing first on children, we're actually helping parents too, and we're also helping them to find like a way in. Because as a second language speaker, an additional language speaker, being able to support with phonics, reading and spelling, that wasn't easy for my mum. But through the colour coding, it enables parents, it gives them like straight away a really quick and easy, here's a view in. Okay, this is what these spellings make this sound, these spellings make this sound. That's strange. Some of them are the same spelling making different sounds. And of course, like, people come across that all the time in their everyday reading. It's not to say that we're talking about people if they can't read. We're talking about just that actually having a system, even putting it together, I could start to see, oh gosh, I didn't know that. That's strange. And like, actually, how complicated is this? There's over 144 ways of spelling just 44 sounds. And it's so complicated that even people in academics, they can't actually decide quite how many different ways there are, because it's from the history of our language. It's changed. We changed the way that we say certain vowel sounds and then our spellings, and we changed it over time a few hundred years ago, at the same time that the printing press became widely used. So that's why English in particular has this issue. Other languages have this too, but out of all, we really are up there at the top. So actually, it's not a phonetic language, and so children do need that extra support, and parents who are multitasking, have their own lives and their own jobs. They also need the support. We can't expect them to be teachers, but particularly parents who have their spinning plates for many other reasons. It's great to help them, and as second language learners, like I say, it feels great that it can enable them to make a real difference at home as well. And also it's more fun, let's face it.
No,
it's
absolutely.
fun and it's engaging, and that's the bit like home, it helps as well.
Yeah, because that whole thing, what you were saying about the English language, is incredibly difficult, and and there are times when even we muddy the water. And I trained when I trained to do my job. I trained with a guy from Yorkshire. And, just saying the word bath, which is what I was from Kent, so I said bath, he said bath. You know, I saw something the other day. There's 3 different ways of saying garage, or I forget what the third one was. You know, so even just teaching phonics and looking at a word, say for example, like bath. You know, seeing how it's spelled. How do you actually pronounce that? You know, it's not. There's no R in bath, but I always say I'm going for my bath now. You know, so how you do it and the way that we can teach our children is vitally important, isn't it?
It so is, and just like having those hooks. You know, one thing to be able to engage children as they first look in, so that they want to continue. You know, learning. And I think for me as a kid, it was really, you know, I liked painting, I liked color, I liked creative things. And so it was really, the mission was like, okay, how can we make that all work together? So actually in Monster Phonics, it started off first of all with just the color coding in the first sort of 6 months to 8 months, and working with groups of children and getting them into reading. Children who really struggled. I found that you know, superheroes, characters, larger than life comics, cartoon characters, Mr. Men. These are things that, like, you know, children liking different things, but on the whole, they loved characters, and the characters felt super important. So at that time when I was working I was a learning support teacher in a really large school, and I knew I could then come to a group, or I'd be asking a child to come work with me outside of a lesson, which isn't always lovely for children. I could have actually things that were really cool. And that's one of the reasons as well why I brought music into it. Anything that was cool and that they would tune into and make learning easier is very much what we did. And it's about instilling confidence as well, isn't it? So through the color coding, you're already giving children a way in where you're giving them that extra support. And that support's not there forever, because we're teaching children to read without it. So it gets dropped as the children go through the books. But to have that, so that if, for example, in a case where a child is reading out loud, they've got that extra confidence, so they kind of know that I'm going to be able to do this. And of course, then it drops. It's not like it's a trick, but it's giving that like extra little whisper in the ear to help just at the beginning. So you really increasing confidence. And we all know as adults how important confidence is. It can be the thing that, you know, makes or breaks you. And it's, you know, it's something that, say for myself, I struggled with massively. So if you can give children the confidence at the beginning of their learning journey, I think they'll have it for life. So I think that's another thing that we're trying to do. Well, it's teaching reading, but I think confidence is in success.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, I mean, obviously I know how it works, but because we use it with great success at the school. But for those people who may not know how it works, you mentioned about the characters. How does that dovetail in with the actual way that Monster Phonics works?
Okay, so the way that children are taught to read in school, they're taught to read in using something called synthetic phonics. So synthetic phonics teaches letter sounds and then helps to teach children to blend them together so that they can read lots of different words. And so there's an order of teaching that's the best order to read the maximum number of words as early on as possible. Okay, so that's why in the first week, children are taught sounds like, you know, the SATP, because then they can start making words like sat and pat and tap. But Monster Phonics teaches in the same order, and most phonics schemes do generally a similar order. But what we do that's different is where we've got the long vowels, so all the different ways of spelling A, E, I, O, U, U. That's where it gets really complicated. And for that, then we have a monster that makes that sound. So when I talked earlier on about the A sound, so angry red A is a red, very friendly, very excitable, and
We've got a few of them.
And actually, it's all some of these actually characters. They have other aspects to their personality. I'll go into that in a minute because I think it relates to children. But angry red A says A. So we have all of the spellings that are pronounced A. They are then the same color as angry red A, which is red. So we've got AY. That makes an A sound. It's red, and so it helps children to see like day. They can read more easily. So it's linking the color to the sound. And each of the colours are linked to a character, and that character has a life as well. So it's also making phonics, let's face it, it's very abstract. It's actually quite difficult to view into what is this about. It's not like teaching about the Romans. It's something really abstract. So it's giving a face and a life to that sound. So we've got angry red A makes the A sound, and green froggy, she's obviously green, and she colour codes the E sounding graphemes, E sounding spellings. So, and there are loads of these. There's a single letter E like in we and she, and Y as in family at the end, but there's quite a number. So she's a teacher and she lives in a teapot house in Monster Phonics School. All the monsters weirdly go to school and they also have jobs, which gives us lots of stories to make it really interesting. The I sound is yellow eye. So he's yellow and he's a spy, lives on top of a lighthouse, and he colours those yellow. So IGH, for example, quite tricky, as in night and light. The IGH are yellow. So when children see it, they think, oh, I know that sound, it's I. So it makes it a lot easier. It's helping them to chunk the word up as well. The pink is Miss Ono. So the O sound is coloured pink. Miss Ono is a dance teacher, but she bumps into things a lot. And when she bumps into them, she says, oh no, so you have an action as well that goes along with the sound, with the colours, all helping to build the memory. Yoo-hoo is a purple little monster that lives in the outer universe, and he makes the U sound. So if you point and say you, then all of those U sounding graphemes or U sounding spellings are coloured purple, like Yoo-hoo is a purple monster. And then there's another sound. Now, in most phonics schemes, they actually lump these together, but they are not one. They're not one sound. They're two. So there's U, and there's oo, and that helps children differentiate. So it just helps spelling all around. So the oo sound is coloured blue, and there's a character you'd like him very much. He's a DJ, Dave.
Wow.
And he's very cool, because we know you guys are so.
Oh, that rules me out then.
So you're definitely a cool blue, and cool blue has lots of different spellings that sound like ooh. So that helps children to pick that out and spell that. Brown owl is a mountain rescue owl, and she colour codes the owl sounds. Now there's only two spellings, there's OW and OU, but they're in lots and lots of words, so that was very important. Then we've got our silent letters that make no sound at all, and they are white in Monster Phonics, and that's really important because that helps children to see, there is a letter in that word, but we're not going to pronounce it, and we're not going to miss it out when we're then spelling. And then we've got the tricky letters that make a completely different sound to what.
So for our listeners, the parts of the word that don't make a sound, could you give an example of that?
Yes, like for example, when. So you've got the W, the H, and the EN. Now, actually, if you're in Scotland, you would pronounce a little bit of that when, but it's where the sound has been lost. So, for example, friend. There's an I there in friend that makes no sound at all. And the English language is full of these, more than other languages. And it's partly because we dropped the sounds where we found them difficult. So like in Germany and Sweden, they would say gna and kna. We've just dropped it because it was awkward. And there's some really weird things that happened, like that WH originally a few hundred years ago would have been HW. We switched it the other way around and we used to say hua. So that you can hear that in some like the sort of Celtic languages, like going into Wales, you can still hear that sort of like that English we had at that time, because we had this change that went throughout the UK but didn't go to the complete extremities of the UK. So it's to help that.
I see.
Help the silent letters. And then the tricky letters where where there's completely different sound to what we've been teaching the children so far. So for example, we know that we can have the G, letter G, the sort of soft G, so where we'd have J, like in giant. So it's alerting the children, hey, this is gold, this is something different going on here. What is it exactly? You might have other examples like there's two different ways of pronouncing double O. So we've got oo, but then we've also got so like good and cook. And so it's helping again, alerting to see, oh, there's a difference here. There's something else going on. And because they were the trickiest areas, we color coded them gold to give it the most excitement, the most bling, to give it the most attention. And then you've just got the straightforward phonetic letters, which we call the black cat's letters. So you imagine it's like little black cats, and black cat in itself is a very, very straightforward phonetic word. So words. So all of those letters that children are first taught at the start, like we talked about S, A, T, P, at, they're all straightforward black cat phonetic letters. And you think, okay, so children don't need to know about the monsters till later on, but that isn't the case, because alongside phonics, and we're teaching children to read with phonics, so sat, pat, tap, we are also teaching them very common words, high frequency words. And high frequency words are super, super important, because the first 300 words make up 65% of all words in print. And there's something else about high frequency words. Because they were really, really common, it meant that when all of this change in our language happened a few hundred years ago, the most common words, the most common spellings stuck, and they stuck earlier. And it's almost like if you imagine them sticking kind of mid-flow. So they are actually they are the hardest in general for learning to read and spell. Not all of them, but a lot of them are quite tricky. And so in the past, we've often, in the world of phonics and world of reading and teaching, we've referred to them as the tricky words. And that's not always that helpful, because tricky might suggest that it's really, really difficult, and tricky, the whole word is tricky. Well, it's not. It's often just a little bit of that word is tricky. So if I give an example, want is a very, very common word, isn't it? But it's not spelled W like O. It's spelled with an A, and that A is we would call that a tricky letter, and we would color that gold so children can see straight away. I don't know exactly what's happening here, but I do know there's something different about this, and it helps them to see a pattern, because actually A after W making an O sound is actually really common. So want, wasp, wash. So it helps them to see these patterns.
War. Yeah, W-O-R. You would think if you was a child just starting up, you'd think that war was spelled W-O-R, wouldn't you?
Yes, that's it. And then that's again another a pattern that's in there. So there's lots of things we do as well to help parents to see into this. We've got our website, but we also have parent presentations, and parents can turn up to those. We have those on Eventbrite. We advertise them, but we also have like a pre-recorded one that parents could just dip into at any point as well on the website. So it's a parent information session, and schools will often share these as well to help parents see in. So it talks about the color coding, how it works, and then it also gives like tips and ideas about things that you can do at home to support. And they're all like things that are easy and free and fun, so they're not hard for parents.
That's fantastic. Now, I'm delighted to say that Ingrid is going to be back next week, folks. This is a 2-part adventure. So Ingrid's going to come back next week to share some more about how it all works, and what she's found and the results that she's been picking up. And we're going to be sharing what a difference it's made to Dogsthorpe Infant School. So if you're interested in that, then join us next week and find out a little bit more about this wonderful resource. Now, in the meantime, I'm going to get a little bit of homework for you, all you listeners. Until next week, you've got 7 days to go and visit the Monster Phonics website. Could you give the address, please, Ingrid?
Yes, it is www.monsterphonics.com.
Monsterphonics.com. Don't worry if you didn't get that, or if you're driving to work and you can't write anything down. It doesn't matter. Double click when it's safe for you to do so. Double click on this podcast and the text will open up and you're just 1 click away from this website. Thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to talking to you next week, Ingrid.
Thank you very, very much for having me.